It sounds a little pie in the sky, as you know. People are
Yeah.
saying, oh, sure, girls. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But you're really talking about working with energy, working with the bond between us, between all of us here,
Yes.
between Oprah and Obama and the newly married royal couple. Somehow we're connected, and we long for connection and wholeness as human beings.
But I'm also talking about how people who fire together, wire together. One of the things with the bond is, one of the things I talk about is getting a larger view of self-interest. And that's one of the problems we have since we've defined ourselves so much as individual. And I'll give you an example of this. You know, we create competition by defining ourselves so smallly. There's a thing called a superordinate goal. It was created by a social psychologist who had a summer camp. And he created a summer camp with a lot of 12-year-old boys. And he put them in 2 cabins, and he had them create their own identity and play highly competitive games. And of course, after a while, they were killing each other. Then he decided to create some crises in the camp that could only be fixed by the collective efforts of everyone. And the boys started to thaw, the boys started to get together, and by the end of the camp, they were best buddies. And that kind of idea, working together for a common goal, works in every sphere, whether it is business or your local neighborhood. Because what happens is, according to the science, you know, when we're all working together for a common goal, our brains start resonating in tandem. We start getting on each other's wavelengths, no matter how different. And we also raise each other's game. Some study of Oxford rowers found that when you work together with people, you have a higher pain threshold than when you work individually, when you row individually.
Sure, in spite of yourself.
Yeah.
Because they did studies on sorority houses many years ago, and when women lived together, they all had their periods at the same time. Now, go figure. What's that about? Everybody started to regulate, and I know that's a study for another day. But looking at merging our outside life with our interior life, how do we do that?
Well, I think it's about living the bond every day of your lives. You know, we have as our goal all the time that we have to, you know, take care of ours and ours alone. But if you start changing your ideas about this, I mean, one of the things that I talk about in the book is that scientists have found that all it takes is 1 or 2 instigators with tiny, tiny acts of generosity to start changing a whole culture of selfishness.
Leaving money in a Coke machine, a Coca-Cola machine for someone else, plugging someone's meter, you mean acts of kindness or what?
Exactly, just things like that. There was a woman who did leave money in a Coke machine for her business, and it was a terrible, selfish, inward-looking company. And she so freaked out the employees that they started a neighborhood watch scheme to find out who this secret Santa was. So she upped her game and started leaving donuts on the other floor. And she suddenly changed the whole culture of that company to generosity, to creating things together. It's that kind of because we're so infected, because we're so connected. You know, those kinds of moves, those kinds of moves away from selfishness can have a huge ripple effect.
Where does forgiveness fit in? You give examples in the book. Certainly you have a white supremacist and a Holocaust survivor, and somehow they managed to find forgiveness.
Yes, well, in that case, this was a healing dialogue. It's the same idea that we talked about, the idea of not having to be right, but sharing deeply and putting the relationship first. This pair got together, and the woman, who was the daughter of a Holocaust survivor, said to the man, who was Gottfried Lieb, who was a member of the Hitler Youth Movement, you know, did you participate in this? And he said, well, I beat up a few Jews, but I was just 16. So she said, okay, so if you had been 10 years older, would you have sent my relatives to the gas chambers? And he said, oh my God, I just don't know. And what he meant was, you know, he had just admitted, I could have been a mass murderer. And so she understood there that in this admission, there was great pain there, and she felt the pain, and it made the connection. And she turned to him and said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. And what she meant at that moment is, we're not Nazi and Jew anymore. We're not the other to each other. we're connected now. It's over.
So are you saying at the base that subatomically we're connected, whether we like it or not? And the more we connect and the less we fight in the world at all levels, the better it will be. It sounds so simple, but it's not.
Well, it is so simple, and this is the point. We all think that we have to wait for our leaders to make these decisions, and that we're waiting for this big top-down approach. But the point is, because we're connected, we are so infected, and scientists have shown that, as I say, just a few instigators can turn a whole game of selfishness around.
Okay, so what amplifies what you call the bonding effect? What amplifies it? Or
any kind of act of kindness, group activities, working together for a common goal. Get your neighborhood together and just have a neighborhood cleanup. Not only do you clean up your neighborhood, you bond as a neighborhood. I mean, we now have got to the point where, we find it hard to be with people who are different from us. But putting things together, creating something for a common goal, no matter how small, bonds people.
So it's like total acceptance. It's taking judgment out, total acceptance, somehow figuring it out. And I think your point is, underneath it all, the bond is really there. We're born with it. Then we kind of screw it up.
We do screw it up, and all we need to do is look at the bigger picture and always say, keep your eye on the bigger idea, always for a bigger goal.
Well, we barely touched on it, so people will have to buy the book. The Bond, Connecting Through the Space Between Us. Lynne McTaggart, our guest. She'll be speaking tonight at the Delta Vancouver Airport Hotel.
Yes.
And tomorrow, 9 to 5.
I've got a whole day workshop, yes.
How great.
Thank
Interesting.
you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Fanny.
Lynne McTaggart, The Bond.